In part 1, we dived headfirst into Aurane's waters, discovered that he'd become a pirate king in the Sea of Dawn, and we started climbing up the Velaryon family tree. So let's pick it up there. Could Aurane be working to restore Valyrian rule of Westeros? Let's start closer to home with Aegon Targaryen. On the face of it, it seems unlikely that Aurane would have even known about young Griff, the boy claiming to be Rhaegar's son, Aegon. After all, it was Varys who was secretly working for Aegon's cause, and he disappeared before Aurane became significant in King's Landing, so there's no clear avenue for their discourse. Aegon already has the support of the Golden Company.
Gold! Beautiful gold!
He's gaining power in the Stormlands, and there's a possibility he'll have Dawn behind him. And there's no telling how the Reach Lords will react to whatever happens at the Battle of Seal. However, 4 of the Golden Company's ships got held up by a storm after leaving Lys, so they could do with some additional naval power. Double, however, you know what archipelago sits right between Lys and the Stormlands? The Stepstones. The same Stepstones that Aurane is supposedly the new pirate king of. Maybe Aurane decided that 10 ships wasn't enough.
More toppings!
Who knows though, there are a lot of possibilities for young Griff's true identity, and it's difficult to discuss such a wild card in concrete terms.
The wild draw 4!
It's possible that he's a Velaryon, or at least it's possible that some people think he's a Velaryon. If this is the case, and there's precisely zero evidence for it, Aurane could be setting up in the Stepstones to aid his kinsman. Of course, the most prominent theory on Aegon's true identity is that he's from House Blackfyre. Now, we're infuriatingly unaware of House Velaryon's actions in the Blackfyre rebellions, in spite of their huge involvement in the dance, but there are some conclusions we can draw that hopefully aren't too dubious. To start us off, Daemon Blackfyre's mother was Daena the Defiant, a daughter of Aegon III and Daenerys Velaryon. After Baelor the Blessed died, the crown passed from Aegon's progeny to his brother, Viserys II, thereby eliminating Velaryon blood from the monarchy. From a purely familial perspective, House Velaryon would certainly be more interested in supporting Daemon than King Daeron, whose last Velaryon ancestor was Queen Alyssa, who was his great-great-great-great-grandmother, and also his great-great-great-great-great-grandmother, because, you know, Targaryens and their incest. It's important to note that Daeron's branch of the Targaryen family was marrying out rather than in, effectively removing the Velaryons from the extended royal family once and for all. After Daenerys, the only Velaryon that we know of who held a position of power outside of Driftmark itself is Lucerys, over 100 years later once the Targaryens had reverted back to their incestuous traditions. The first Blackfyre rebellion was likely just as much about the legitimacy of kings as it was about foreign influences at court, Daeron representing the new way with his Dornish wife Mariah Martell, and Daemon representing the old way with his Tyroshi wife Kiera, who I would argue was probably from Valyrian stock. It would make perfect sense for House Velaryon to support Daemon Blackfyre and his descendants. However, the Velaryons had learned their lesson from the dance. Though the military landscape had drastically changed between the wars, with dragons now out of the picture, the dance took a huge toll on the house, and they were probably none too eager to throw in with the Blackfyre pretenders. 100 years later, though, and against an already fractured leadership on the Iron Throne, the time might be right for the Velaryons to give their swords and their sails to a Blackfyre. That is, if Aurane and his family are even aware of young Griff and his identity. In the small council meeting, Aurane states that the Golden Company has broken its contract with Myr, which is accurate information crucial to the machinations of the Aegon cause. However, he then says that he thinks they've been hired by Stannis to land in Westeros. Now, this is clearly wrong, but thinking it through, it actually seems too wrong. You see, Cersei immediately corrects Aurane, saying that the Golden Company is going to Volantis, citing information that Qyburn picked up on the docks. But wait, that's a bit weird, because Aurane also cited the docks. They both claim the same source, but come up with conflicting information. One is right, while the other is impressively incorrect. Keep in mind, the only other instances in the books that conflate Stannis with the Golden Company are specifically to fool and confuse people about what the company is actually doing. So was Aurane really just so bafflingly wrong, or was he trying to confuse the council on the issue? Was he playing dumb in regards to the company's actions? Was he trying to deflate the idea of the company landing in Westeros? Regardless of whether or not that was his actual intent, Aurane seems to have accomplished these things. Lord Water's words around the Golden Company are supremely suspicious. Now that that's all said, we do well to remember the Velaryons who served as Aegon the Conqueror's masters of ships. It would be fitting if history were to repeat itself with the second conquering Aegon and his Velaryon admiral in this second Dance of the Dragons, especially if neither the Aegon nor the admiral are truly of those houses. The other Targaryen claimant though, how likely is it that Aurane is aiming to aid Dany in her conquest of Westeros? Well, it's certainly conceivable that Aurane could arrive in Slavers Bay around the beginning of the Winds of Winter and provide Daenerys with his ships. He left King's Landing towards the end of Feast and is supposedly lurking in the Stepstones at what's probably around the beginning of Winds. So the physicality of Aurane reaching Slavers Bay at around the same time Dany might hypothetically return there probably shouldn't be considered an issue. But from a meta-narrative point of view, this plot is already happening, with Victarion Greyjoy and his Iron Fleet coming Dany's way. Of course, there's approximately 1 billion different ways Victarion's plan won't work out perfectly, and his fleet is comprised of smaller longships, not warships. Aurane's ships totally dwarf Victarion's, so that could certainly help out with transporting Daenerys' many ground forces. Then again, so could the Volantene fleet in the event of a slave revolt, which seems so imminent at this point that the captain's name might as well be Chekhov.
Woefully esoteric.
Woodhouse!
And those ships are already at Slavers Bay, as are Victarion's, and not at the Stepstones. Even further into the abstract, Dany's story has already had everything that Aurane could offer. A man with larger ambitions delivering a navy to win Dany's favour? Well, that's Victarion. A dashing and witty man sliding his way into Dany's mind and heart and pants? Daario. A Westerosi who has legitimate reasons to ally with her, attempting to claim a dragon? Oh. And while it would be, let's be honest here, simply f***ing awesome for Aurane to compete with Daario for Daenerys' affections, or for him to find his way onto a dragon's back, these are unfounded ideas constructed from that lowest caliber of metallic foil. Aluminium. In contrast to young Griff, we actually do know that Aurane is aware of Daenerys and her dragons. He even brings it up to Cersei in that first small council meeting. I hesitate to take up the council's time with trifles, but there has been some queer talk heard along the docks of late. Sailors from the east, they speak of dragons. And manticores, no doubt, and bearded snarks. Come back to me when you hear talk of dwarves, my lord. This passage was written either to let us know that Aurane is aware of Dany, or that Cersei doesn't care about Dany. While the latter seems more likely, it certainly does throw Dany into the mix of Aurane's possible loyalties. In a vacuum, yes, Aurane would probably screw Cersei over and go straight to Daenerys and be the Velaryon master of ships for this conquering Targaryen instead of that one, playing Khalees to her Rhaenyra. But Aurane isn't in a vacuum. As cool as space pirates would be! And there are more things to consider even beyond all the other fleets being thrown at Dany, like how the Targaryens have more or less shunned the Velaryons for over 100 years, and how royal Targaryen dynastic precedent devalues bastards like Aurane, and how supporting the potential Blackfyre claimant in the story seems much more befitting of Aurane's familial history. I'm just saying, if I were in his shoes and I knew about both of these claimants, I would go with Aegon. I would also buy new shoes, because these ones are wet. So yes, Aurane could be headed to Slavers Bay, and it does make some base-level sense, but it doesn't seem as compelling as the Aegon cause, and there are still more options to consider outside of Valyrian blood, options which aren't half a world away. So let's use a car metaphor and go back to the small council. Taena of Myr, who is deep in Cersei's service and trust and pants, along with her husband Orton Merryweather, are most likely Tyrell agents to some capacity, considering that Taena somehow knew that a maid was spying on Cersei for Marjorie. Whether they're in league with the Tyrells directly or just working to advance the Reacher's standing, and thus their own, is kind of irrelevant. Taena cheesed it from the capital after Cersei was arrested, just like Aurane did, which implicates her in having been up to some shady shit. But it's a much larger reach to suggest that Aurane, another small councilman, is also working for House Tyrell, though Aurane's actions do seem to align with what could be some kind of Tyrell conspiracy. Aurane's first appearance in A Feast for Crows is at Tommen's wedding, where he is socializing with Eleanor Tyrell, one of Marjorie's ladies-in-waiting, a close confidant and pillow fiend, and second cousin once removed. Does that say... It's meant to say friend. I accidentally wrote fiend instead of friend. Now, this could easily just be flavor text, but so could everything, and there would be no point theorizing on these books at all. So either this was nothing, a charming young man making his appearances at a large social event, or it could be some point of coordination between Aurane and Team Tyrell. That's not all that this idea is based on, though. At the small council meeting in Cersei 4, the best chapter, Cersei congratulates herself on removing the roses from the small council, and then she immediately looks at Orton Merryweather and then Lord Waters. There can be a great degree of confidence that Orton is actually a rose, so could Aurane be as well? If that were the case, this would be some pretty satisfying foreshadowing on the inevitable reread. But that's enough about hanging out with Tyrell handmaidens and possible literary hints. Let's cut to the chase. Aurane's actions do seem to benefit House Tyrell. Waters is the one who delivers the news to Cersei that Loras was gravely injured in the siege of Dragonstone. There are no witnesses to this conversation. Cersei then spreads this information herself to Marge and her handmaidens. Should this nugget of information ever be exposed as, say, a lie, it would look as though Cersei had fabricated it herself, and there would be no evidence that Aurane was the liar here and not Cersei, especially considering that Aurane is now long gone. So maybe Aurane delivered this, for lack of a less disturbing term, fake news to Cersei purposefully, to A, convince her that Loras is stuck on Dragonstone and unable to fight, which absolutely affects the upcoming trials of Cersei and Margaery, and 2, to fabricate concrete proof that Cersei is indeed a liar and her pants are on fire. Watch out, Taina. After all, Aurane gave Cersei a wicked smile after telling her the news, which usually indicates that a character has a deeper motive. Aurane could be planning to use the ships to assert Tyrell dominance in and around King's Landing. 10 Drommons that big could probably blockade the city if needed, but this doesn't line up at all with the report of the Pirate King and the Stepstones. It's also possible that he's taking his fleet to the Reach to lift the Ironborn raids there, but this seems unlikely considering the immense Red Wine fleet is heading there anyway, and is already ahead of Aurane. But maybe Aurane wants to be behind the Red Wine fleet.
What now?
Maybe he's planning on trailing them all the way to the Red Wine Straits, where he would sandwich them with the Ironborn, and join Euron Greyjoy in battle, or maybe pose a secondary threat to Euron, in a there can only be one badass pirate king kind of way, and get his ass handed to him. Or perhaps he's stationed in the Stepstones to stop Humphrey Hightower from returning to Old Town with cell sales from Lyse. What evidence is there for Aurane being in league with the Crozai or involved with him at all? Precisely zero. But you look me in the video and tell me you wouldn't love Lord Waters turning up at the Battle of Blood. Yeah. In all seriousness, Aurane working with the Tyrells or the Greyjoys is a unique take on the situation, but we have little to no explanation for why he would be assisting these groups. It's interesting, but it doesn't quite add up. What would he want from the Tyrells, or Euron, or even Daenerys and Aegon? What exactly does Aurane Waters want? Does he just want to watch the world burn? Well, join me in part 3, where I'll try to answer those questions and wrap this whole thing up.
Hey, thanks for watching this video. If you feel like you enjoyed the insanity enough, feel free to press that little red button below and subscribe. I know this video was a long time coming and I'm deeply sorry for that, but rest assured that part 3 will be coming in a lot less time. The feedback I've received on the first 2 videos has been overwhelmingly kind and encouraging, so make sure you check those out if you haven't already by clicking on one of these things and diving even deeper into my madness. Cheers.
I can't read my own scripts properly.